Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call today's meeting, or this evening's meeting, to order. I'd first of all like to announce that we have Councillor Auld and Councillor Fraser are attending by Zoom tonight. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to this agenda? Councillor Auld or Councillor Fraser, any additions? Okay, seeing none, just looking for a motion to accept the agenda as presented, please. Councillor Brown, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. We have no delegations. Previous minutes from May 4th meeting. Everybody's had a chance to go over those minutes. Does anybody see anything that needs to be corrected, or everybody's good with the minutes? Okay, so just a motion to accept the minutes as presented then, please. Councillor Auld? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. We'll move on to number 7.1. It's the RFD, the 2021 tax rate bylaw, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Betty.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. You have before you the 2021 tax rate bylaw. I am going to go through it in I'd say a fair bit of detail, just so that I've explained all of the different areas. So this will be a little longer than normal. So we've prepared the tax rate bylaw for 2021. It's due to, this is different this year. We did an assessment notice earlier in the year. They were sent out on March 1st, and the deadline for assessment inquiries or complaints is April 30th. So the public could appeal, and if they had questions on their assessment, speak to our assessor. Communications will be preparing a newsletter to go out with our tax notice, and we'll also be advertising it in the Mountaineer for 2 weeks once we've mailed it out, just to let people know that it's gone out. So it is a little different process than last year. They still have till July 31st to make their payments. This year, some of the highlights in this year is last year when we were doing the budget deliberations, the CPI, it was floating around, but it was about 1.4%. As council chose, we've done a 0% tax increase. The split between residential and non-residential property taxes still stays the same. So it's non-res is 4.98 mill rates higher than your regular residential, and the vacant residential continues to be a little bit higher than just normal residential. The final assessment, and we will go through that page in more detail, but just we had a very strong deflationary trend this year. So in total, our assessment went down by 43 million. So it went from 916 million to 873. The overall increase is about 4.71%. Residential dropped 33.4 million. So it was a little higher at 4.9, and non-res dropped by 4 million for an average of 2.3. So we've seen quite a decline in assessment. The 2021 property tax rates as set by the government, we received them last week on Wednesday. So thank goodness we got them. Otherwise, they usually tell us to use last year's rates, which does create some difficulties if there's any changes. It was really good. They did a 0% increase in recognition of COVID. So thank you. I've done various variance analysis, and we'll go through them. The biggest thing and I'm just going to touch on it, but the inflation and deflation, it changes between categories, and it depends on how much properties change within a category. So based on the average, if your individual property decreases more than the average, you would see a drop in taxes. If it decreased less than the average, so your property retained its value, you might see a small increase because everything settles out in a pool. So it's a difficult, hard to explain, but we'll get there. The proposed tax rate bylaw, we're looking at a levy of $9,188,996. That is a total of $1,031 less than last year. Last year, we were at $9,190,000. So we've done our best to keep it at exactly the same rate. You can't ever quite get it exactly the same, so. The next table just kind of shows you where the money is coming from in each asset class. So you can see that residential's collecting 6.2 million and non-residential, these are our two biggest categories, is collecting 1.8 million. If you go to the next page, it shows the school requisition and the senior housing. So the school requisition is collecting 2.7 million, and the housing is 86,000. Just in comparison, last year we collected 2.78 million, so it's actually a little bit less, and it's about 5,000 more for the senior housing. The next table shows, just on a global view, the changes between inflation and the deflation, there is no inflation this year, between what we presented in the budget, because we took, in the budget, it had the new assessment that was included, and in this final one now, we've received the adjustments in assessment, so you can just see those numbers there.
Sorry, Betty, which table are you on right now?
It's the one that's orange and
That one,
green.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The next one that just shows the change in property taxes from 20 to 21. I like to do a little summary by residential class because they're all quite unique and different from each other. So it shows single family, duplex, townhouses, condos, and mobile homes in their own lot versus in the park. And this is showing what the change for the average. The average is sitting at about 274,000 for a single family home, but a single family home would see potentially a decrease of $27. Townhouses are showing an increase this year. I haven't done like detailed analysis of that, but what that kind of shows me is that last year they probably had a bigger decrease than other people, and their assessed value has gone up. Because the assessment's based on the past 3 years, when we picked up a new year and dropped the prior year, their sales might have been a little more strong than a regular single family home, which makes sense. And maybe their prices were holding their own as compared to other properties. So they'll see a small increase just because their assessment retained its value. But overall, the average residential will go down by $17. So we've tried to maintain the status quo. The schools have maintained their status quo, which is excellent. So there, unless you have a big shift in your assessment relative to your neighbors, your taxes should stay relatively the same or go down. The next page is just a graph showing, now I have 2 years worth of data, but it's showing sort of an average property tax, just so you can see how everybody is relative to one another. I'm going to go into the body of, I'm going to skip the bylaw, just because it's, a lot of the data that I've covered is already in there. But just if you look at your different attachments, the first one, and we do give it to you in detail, because then you can see the different classes. And this is just a blown up view of the table where it shows for every class what the assessment value is from our budget to the final. And then it also shows you the deflation for each class. So if you look at residential, you can see that single families homes went down $26 million. So it was a big drop. Improved non-residential If you look at improved commercial and improved commercial large business, and I haven't looked at the number specifically, but there's a large drop in the large business and an increase in the improved commercial. Part of that is there was a couple properties that were reassessed and they moved from the large business to the regular. So it's really just a switching of classes. And our exempt properties, I don't focus on them a lot when we're doing the taxes because they do not pay taxes. But overall, our entire assessed value went down almost 50 million in the last year, which is, I mean, that's big. If we went up 50 million, I'd be dancing in the streets. The next page is just showing you, it's basically the same information, but we've put in an average column so that you can see what sort of the average for each type of property is. You'll see I mentioned single family, it's at 274. Townhouses are at 217. So it's kind of giving you an idea of what the average value of a home is. And the goal of a lot of this information is just to give you a feel for the numbers and where the changes have gone. The next one is our 2021 tax rates. So again, we start with showing you the assessment summary. We show you, and this information is all included in our bylaws, so it shows the levy, the assessment, and what the individual tax rate, and then converted to a mill rate is. And I always like to include it, I think we included it in the bylaw, but a table where we show, yes, we do, a table where we show all three tax rates added together. Just that way people don't have to try to add in their head and look at it. There is a designated industrial property for two of the categories. It's very, very small. We collect less than $1,000 on that. It's other municipalities that have larger, we call it dip, but have larger dip could potentially collect more. Last year, we received a notification from the government that if it was under $1,000, they didn't even want it submitted. So we get to keep it. But the next one is just a graph showing you what the allocation of 2021 tax dollars is. 76 cents of every dollar goes to us, and 23 cents is basically a flow through from us straight to education, and 1 cent on every dollar is collected for seniors requisition. The next one, and this is where I've done a little bit of comparisons or analysis on the residential, and I did hand out a sheet for commercial, and I did email it to the two counselors that are on video. So if you look at the single family, it shows you the number of properties that we've got. So in total, we've got 2,550 properties. Single family being the largest, there's 1,718. Again, the average value, and then translating that into what their average tax is, so 2676. I also show you what the education and requisition, and I combine them just because it makes it easier. So again, I'll focus on the single family. An average home would pay $795 for education and seniors, and then combined, an average home would pay $3,471, and the average for all residential is coming in at $2,987. And I'm going to refer you to the handout sheets, and just we did a bit of more of a comparison. So the 2021 tax comparison, the first table that you've got, again, it's really just trying, I think, to reassure you and to show you the effect of the assessment and the tax rate change. So I didn't cover that. When we sat down to calculate the tax rate, our tax rate or mill rate has increased by 0.5%. That's to compensate for the drop in assessment. So our tax rate only increased by a very small amount in order to collect the same amount of dollars. And when you see it compared to last year, so again, bottom line, it's $1,000 less. But if you look at, say, residential, we're actually collecting $13,000 less from the whole residential pocket, which is 2,300 homes. So if you divide 13,000 by 2,300, I think it worked out to $5. So the average, it's going to go down. Between the non-res regular or improved and the non-res large, there's two large changes there. Those offset each other because of what I said, where there was some properties that are moving from one category to the other. So overall, if you look at this, you can see that there is no really big increase in any category, which means that their individual tax notice should stay relatively the same. Does that make sense? Barring a huge swing in, if somebody did improvements to a home or if it was reassessed and the value went up, I would say mostly due to an improvement, you could see an increase in taxes. The next page is, we tried to pull a sample of commercial properties, just to show you what the impact is. It tends to vary widely, and again, there's not as many, and it depends on whether their properties were assessed up or down. The top one is actually a large industrial or large commercial. They will see an increase. And just if you look at the assessment on the other side, their assessment decreased by 300,000, but that's probably less. Like the reason why they went down. So theirs was less than the average. So they're going to see a $1,300 decrease in their taxes. The next two are actually properties that went from large to regular. So their tax savings is partly because there's a change in tax rate, and because their assessments actually went up, but because they're going from a higher tax rate to a slightly lower, it's compensated and they're going down. The next, or all the rest of them, are just regular non-residential or commercial properties. I sorted them in order of increase or decrease, with the first one being the largest decrease. So that property is actually going to see a decrease of $3,000 in taxes, all the way down to the highest that we identified, and it will see an increase in taxes. But if you look at their assessment, for some reason, it's gone up 131,000. So you're going to see a wide variety in the commercial, but when you take a sample, and this, it's not statistically significant, but just looking at a small sample, the majority of them are falling all within minus 20 or minus 65 up to plus 73, right? Or plus 174. So they're all within a couple $100 range of increase or decrease, which I think if most people receive that, they're not going to be overly alarmed. Is there any questions on that?
You've done such a great job of explaining this. I just really want to thank you. You put a lot of effort into getting this documentation for us, and I think it's marvelous.
It was actually a joint effort. It was my first year with somebody else that knows taxes, so it was really nice working with a team. But thank you, and that's really our goal, is to make it. There's a lot of numbers on the page. So with that said, I do think it's a very respectful tax increase. I have been looking, and I will continue to monitor sort of other municipalities that are similar to us, what they're doing. The few that I've looked at, I've seen anything from a 1.5% increase down to a 0. So there is a range out there of small increases that reflect CPI to other communities saying we're gonna hold the line. We'll try to bring something back on that.
I think it's probably pretty similar for a lot of municipalities across Alberta, that they will see a decrease in their overall assessment. Is that?
Yeah, we'll try to do, a sample, but we'll try to look at assessment changes within communities as well as sort of what kind of tax increase they've done as well as compared to residential and commercial, just to see how we're fitting with the flow and where we're landing.
Okay.
But we'll bring that back once we can get a little more data.
Okay, that's great. Does anybody have any questions for Betty? No? Councillor Fraser, Councillor Auld, do you have questions?
All good.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much to your team, to Betty and yourself.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you have the tax bylaw before you. It basically contains all the data that I've gone through with you, and the tax rates to show that we want to collect in total $11.979 million in tax levy, 9.188 of which is ours. And if you want to pass the motions, that would be awesome.
So we do have a recommended alternative in front of us, and unless there's any more communication or questions, Councillor Phillips?
There's no further discussion. I'd like to make a motion that council give first reading to bylaw 2021/06, being a bylaw for the 2021 rates of taxation.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay. Councillor Fraser, did I just see your hand? Okay.
I will move that council gives second reading to bylaw 2021/06.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councillor Narang?
I'll move that council give unanimous consent for consideration.
Mike, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll move that council give unanimous consent for consideration to third reading for bylaw 2021/06.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay. Oh, Councillor Auld?
I'll make the final motion that council give third and final reading to bylaw 2021/06, being a bylaw for the 2021 rate of taxation.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay, thanks again, Betty, and we'll move on.
Thank you.
So we'll go on to 8.1, correspondence for action. It's 2021 International Economic Development Week. Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Your Worship. As your request, we put this on the agenda. But we've been asked, or council has been asked to proclaim, actually I think it's this week, as International Economic Development Week.
Thank you.
The date.
Yeah, it is. It is this week. So there are several communities coming out proclaiming International Economic Development Week, and I think it would be ideal for us to do the same. Councillor Narang?
In this proclamation, will this be a permanent thing then, so that we can celebrate it next year in a more timely
Sooner.
fashion and prepare, or do we have to proclaim it each year?
Your Worship, we'd proclaim it each year.
We'd
It's just
have
that
better
we just
notice.
received the correspondence late this year, so.
Something somebody could possibly put on their calendar to look at this sooner. So. Councillor Narang?
Sorry, just a thought, would this be something that we would incorporate our sister city in Japan, being that's International Economic Development Week? Would that be a time where we would promote that partnership as well?
Good
Talk
question.
a little bit about that.
How would you see that working? That's a
Well,
good question.
I don't know for sure, but I thought because part of that relationship is related to tourism.
Yes, and
travel
economic development.
Economic development. So maybe that's something where during that week, there's an educational component to what the value of that relationship is. Just something to think about.
I think that's a great suggestion. I don't know that we could do that this year, but I think for future years, I think that would be ideal. Do you see? Yeah.
No, Your Worship, but actually just with Councillor Narang's comment there about making sure we don't miss it next year, I just question the council if you'd like to develop a policy where we can actually put it in policy that council has proclamations for set events throughout the year, like Seniors Week. We do it every year, but if council develops a policy saying this week, every year is going to be, and we can just do it that way versus coming back.
No, I think that's a good idea. Because we do miss these, a lot of these, and we get them halfway during the week, or, you know, the other one is Orange Shirt Day. We always seem to miss out on that, and I think that's coming up in September. So we still have the opportunity to get ready for that as well this year. Councillor Narang?
Yeah, and I think developing a policy like that would then give us the ability to plan for the year, and then if we wanted orange shirts or whatever it was, we would always be ahead of the 8 ball
Yes.
or behind it, whichever is the good place to be, we would be there.
So I guess would we get admin to bring us back that policy then?
Yeah, Your Worship. So really 2 motions now to
Yeah.
proclaim this one, and then for administration to bring back that policy. So.
Okay, I'll make the first motion to proclaim this week, the week of May, sorry, where does it say it? May 10th to the 15th as 2021 International Economic Development Week. And I'm going to ask then too that we could get this on our website first thing tomorrow, proclaiming this, if that's possible for admin. Okay. All right, any questions around that proclamation? Okay, all in favor of that motion? Okay, that's carried.
I can make the second motion.
Thank you. Okay,
Just a motion to ask admin to bring back a policy around the proclamation of these special occasions with a listing of ones that we commonly do.
okay. Yeah, there's quite a few that come to mind actually, so. Okay, any other questions around that motion? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay. And just moving on to 9.1, correspondence for information. Just looking for a motion to accept 9.1 to 9.7 as course for information. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. We have an action list in front of us. Anybody have any questions on the action list? Okay. Just a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Brown? Oh, sorry, on the screen. It's so hard. Okay, Councillor Brown, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Narang.
I had a question about food security, and I know that we had discussed it about whether it was possible to plant some fruit trees if we were planting trees as well as like raspberry and Saskatoon bushes and whatnot. Did we ever find out if there were any that were suitable for our climate that would work or not? Okay.
Was that at the service level? Councillor Fraser, can you just refresh my memory?
I think we were discussing community gardens and just that within town, there's not a lot of options for, I guess, public food. And I know we had talked about, I can't remember where it was. It must have been the service level review. We talked about the planters on Main Street, but there were issues with those. Just if there were places that we could plant something that's productive as opposed to just ornamental. And I know they'd said that they had to look into what would grow and what was approved, because there's a certain list that will live here after so many years.
I have Ms. Button has her hand up.
Only to recall that it was a discussion that was arising out of the COVID recovery task force last year this time. That's where the conversation originated, with some public requests to or suggestions to that effect.
So, yeah. Councillor Auld?
Just to comment on that, one of the last FCSS meetings that we had, there was discussion regarding that as well. Regarding and possibly doing something over there in the little park over by the Quinn Park there. So there is some discussion at that avenue as well regarding those fruit trees.
Okay, thanks for that. Did you have something to say, Mr. Crowe?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'll just have to review the minutes from I guess it was the COVID task force meeting to see where we missed an action out of that, or report back to council on it.
Okay, so you're good with that, Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Narang?
Mine's actually not really an administrative inquiry, but I just missed saying this under the 9.1 correspondence for information. The letter exchange between yourself and the student was just awesome. And I just wanted to commend you for that. It was so good.
That was thanks
wonderful.
to Laura as well. So,
and I hope that people will take the time to read it, because it is really, really
I'm looking forward to hearing back from them.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sure we will hear back from that student. So, because there was a fairly healthy care package that went. Laura, what can you just let us know what was in that care package to put it together?
I have to give Marina credit for the care package. She assembled it while I was working from home, and then I took it on when she was working from home. A water bottle, I believe there were socks, and then of course our marketing material, visitors guide, program guide, and brochures from some of the tourism operators in the area and type thing like that. It was really quite fun to put together, actually, given everything else we have on our plates and happening in the world. We had fun with it. Yes.
Yeah, that's
so thank you,
great.
Mayor.
So I look forward to hearing back from the student. That'll be maybe a bit more common exchange even. It's fun.
I think there's no doubt that Rocky Mountain House is going to be on the list for that class next year.
Yes,
They're like,
I bet.
oh, right to Rocky. They get good stuff from Rocky.
That's right. Good. I have an administrative inquiry about Quinn Park. I should have asked when Rob was here. Do we know the status of when the Quinn Park will be reopening?
Your Worship, I'll have to check with Mr. Shanks. I'm not 100% positive, so.
Okay, thanks. That's all I had. Anybody else? Does anybody have any notices of motion? Okay. So seeing none, it is 7:33. I will call a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll be going into closed session for a couple of items. Thank you.